Gather round, round 5, the festival of football. It's come and it's gone, and today we sit back and reflect on that round. The highs, the lows, and the very controversial bit in between. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the round recap. What is going on, YouTube universe? Welcome to the Hip and Shoulder, where we discuss everything Australian rules football, and today it is all about the Festival of Gather Round. All 18 teams heading down to South Australia from Thursday through to Sunday, a spectacle in itself, highlighting an area of Australia that normally wouldn't see the light of day outside of an Adelaide or a Port Adelaide game, bringing all teams together and allowing families and football frantics alike to come to one location and celebrate our great game. And for a spectacle that I was kind of on the fence about when it was first organised, I really enjoy Gather Round as a concept. I think getting all supporters into one area and just seeing over the course of the weekend, like a Richmond supporter at an Adelaide game, or a St Kilda supporter down at a Fremantle game, or even Tasmania supporters, which we saw this year. Plenty of Tasmanian Devil hats and scarves around the place. It's a great thing to watch, because for people like myself, and like you guys at home that love football as much as we do, it's just great to see neutral supporters getting behind each and every team over the course of the weekend. I love it. It was great. And this weekend served up a lot. Not only did we get some great showings from some teams might have under-delivered a little bit, especially if you're a Richmond fan, just like myself, but we had a very contentious and controversial point come out of the last game, which has only come to a head only a couple of hours ago at the point of this recording, which we will get to when the time comes. But if we're going to unpack around, it all starts with the very first game, and that was Thursday night football, Adelaide hosting Carlton. And as we've come to expect from Carlton, the second half capitulation was definitely not on the cards this week, because unfortunately it was a quarter time capitulation. Carlton were very competitive in the opening quarter of this game, and then it was all Adelaide after that. And to think if Tom Lynch had just kicked straight in round 1, Carlton would be the only team without a win after 5 rounds. They would be 0-4. Crazy to think, right? At any rate, breaking down the match timeline, at quarter time, Carlton led Adelaide 7-4-46 to 6-3-39. At halftime, it was Adelaide 12-6-78, leading Carlton's 8-6-54. At three-quarter time, 14-8-92, led 9-8-62. And then the final term, 17-12-114, defeated 12-14-86. What was very critical in this game was Adelaide took a lead at the perfect time, because over the course of this weekend, we saw some torrential downpours during our games of football. And the rain came down hard in this Adelaide-Carlton game. So to be able to have a substantial lead before that weather shifts, you know when that weather comes, when it's wet weather football, very hard to control a mark. There's going to be a lot of struggling getting a ball off the ground. People are going to opt to soccer it off the ground or tap it along instead of getting a clean disposal. If you can get a clean buffer ahead of that break, all you have to do is fumble around the contest for the rest of the game, and as long as you can restrict your team to a score, you're going to win comfortably. And that was what exactly happened here. But even when the rain was coming down, Adelaide looked far superior around the contest. This is a team that, over the course of the last few weeks, has been playing against contending teams and failing to get across the line ever so slightly. Carlton needed to find some belief in their game, because we have seen them play great in first halves, and then a second half, they're a shadow of their former selves. This week, it was a good first quarter, and then 3 quarters of football that were absolutely abysmal. Patrick Cripps struggled to get into the game all too much, I thought anyway. Yaga Smith struggled. You can't really hold him accountable, though. He's only a young kid in his first year. So many other players for Carlton struggled. It's almost like they could have used a player in the midfield that prides themselves on tackling pressure and contested possession. It's really weird, huh? Right? The fact that they omitted George Hewitt from this team, on the back of an effort the week prior that saw him not only be the highest disposal getter, but the highest pressure player in the way of tackling around the contest. And then Michael Voss, in the post-game press conference, validated that selection after being smacked in the contest in this game, saying that it was for the better of the team. For the better of the team, that they dropped their best acting player the week prior. I don't fucking understand. Whilst Adelaide would be on a high from getting this win under wraps, it comes on a sour note. They've only just brought Mitchell Hinge back into this lineup, I believe, for this game, and he has gone and done a hamstring, which is going to see him out for weeks. It's always a shame when a player comes back in and is a critical role player like Mitchell Hinge is to Adelaide's defensive line, and they go and injure themselves in the game they came back. Very similar to Collingwood a couple of weeks back. Darcy Moore, their captain, comes back in, ends up doing his hamstring after missing the first few games out. This year's been very tough in the injury realm, whether it's to a key component or whether it's to young kids like myself as a Richmond man, seeing our young kids like slaughtered with injury. It's never a good feeling. Never a good feeling at all. And for Adelaide fans, I feel for you, because Mitchell Hinge is one of those critical role players in that defensive lineup that helps that transitional ball from half back to half forward. And just to see him back and up and about was great. And then to see him go down, you could just see the look of anguish painted all over his face. It was so upsetting. Looking at the team breakdowns for this game, as I said, Adelaide did win around the contest, and they did just shy of 40 disposals clear of Carlton. In the way of kicks, they were clear by 15. In handballs, they were clear by 20. Inside 50s, Carlton actually had 60 inside 50s versus Adelaide's 56, so they gave themselves plenty of opportunity. Around the ground, obviously the weather played into this, but efficiency, both teams were down. The average for Adelaide is 71.5. They only ran at 69.7. The average for Carlton is 70.8. They ran at 67.9. Inside 50. One team overperformed, one team underperformed, which I think is wild. The average for Adelaide inside 50 for their efficiency is 46.9. And in this particular game, they ran at 51.8. For Carlton, they run at an average of 49.4. and ran at only 40% for this game. To get 60 inside 50s, but only run at 40% efficiency when the ball was in there, not a good look. Not a good look at all. And I said during the preseason, no Charlie Curnow, rather, was going to hinder Harry Mackay, and that has been truly the case, I feel, this year for Carlton. They've had to throw Mitch McGovern up forward haphazardly. They've had to lay into players like Brody Kemp to pull their weight around, but 12 goals 14 for their return, 17-12 for Adelaide. It could have been much more respectable on both sides of the scoreboard, I feel. Stoppage work, hit-outs, Adelaide only just in front. Clearances, Carlton actually won by 5, both in the centre clearance and marginally in the stoppage clearance. Contested possessions went the way of 11 to Adelaide. It was uncontested possession by 23. So in the clinches, the contested and uncontested possession was rather close, but it was just Adelaide in those moments, especially in that wet weather football. They were able to stand just that little bit taller. Turning attention from team performance to individual performance, I have a set list of 3 here that I was going to run with. But now that I actually have a look at the input of some of the players that I've kind of overlooked a little bit, and I think I might have been a little bit harsh, I'm going to run on the fly here. I'm actually going to make some changes. I originally had Jordan Dawson for the 1 vote here, but I'm going to pivot, and I'm actually going to give it to Sam Walsh. Sam Walsh had one of, if not the best individual midfield opening quarters that we have seen by any midfielder so far this year. He was absolutely on fire. Did he drop off later in the piece? Yes, but it's hard to look past the effort that this kid put in on the night. He had 29 disposals. I'll get to contested shortly. He had 2 marks, 8 tackles, didn't have a clearance, which is actually strange because I saw him run out of that centre square with a lot of footy, so maybe he got the ball fed to him and then he got the rebound out of there. He had 369 metres gained, and I'm pretty sure he had a game-high score involvement count. He had 14 contested possessions and he had a game-high 11 score involvements. He was critical around the contest. Now, one probably stiff to miss out would be Patrick Cripps, second to most score involvements of any player on the field. He had 7 clearances of his own. He laid 9 tackles, had 29 disposals. He was big. But the 2 vote and the 3 vote here stood tall, hit the scoreboard, and I think impact and value for the quantity they had. Quality for the quantity is what I'm going for here. The 2 vote I gave to Isaac Rankin. He had 22 disposals, 9 of which were contested, 3 marks, 7 tackles, 2 clearances, 370 metres gained, 2 goals, 1 goal assist, and 7 score involvements. And best on ground, Josh Rochelle, one of his best returns, I feel. Hit the scoreboard, was impactful when needed. Those back-to-back goals that he kicked swung momentum back Adelaide's way fiercely. 26 disposals, 13 of which were contested, 2 marks, 5 tackles, 6 clearances, 567 metres gained, 4 goals, and 7 score involvements. When you have a backline like Adelaide's that is impacted by injury, you know, Mitchell Hinge goes down, they're still mixing Mark Keane. Worrell was kind of a little bit wayward with his kicking and turned it over a few times, which is not what we're used to seeing from him. To see players like Rankin, Rochelle, Ben Keys take the game on with speed and impact that scoreboard like they did is what got them over the line in the end. They were able to break lines, they were able to read the ball better ultimately than Carlton. There was one play where Rochelle kicks that goal, that great crumbing goal. You can see him coming up to the contest and being involved at half back. And then as soon as the turnover happens, he's gut running all the way to that forward 50. So it is not just a standard crumbing goal. That is a gut run from the back line to the forward line, outrunning 4 or 5 different Carlton players along the way to get the crumb and then turn around and snap the goal and make it true. It was absolutely brilliant to watch. Adelaide finding themselves, finding a second gear. Carlton, as I said, should be lucky Tom Lynch didn't kick straight in round 1, because they could very well be sitting at the bottom of the ladder without a win, and that would have, I feel, Michael Voss on a rockier platform. I'm still in the box seat saying they need to get rid of Voss. They're not going to move forward with him at the helm, but hey, the fuck do I know? Friday night saw an absolute classic played out at Adelaide Oval. Fremantle defeating Collingwood by 1 singular goal, and it was the same man back-to-back years, Josh Tracy, winning the game off of his own hand and boot. It was almost exactly highlight like reel combined, like side by side, the exact same moment. Ball on the line, game to be won. Tracy goes into defense and takes a contested mark that wins the game, and the commentators were reveling in the fact, saying he's done it again back-to-back years, and that's theatre. That's cinema. That is Showtime football. This game, although very low scoring, I thought was great to watch, because the scoreboard didn't reflect the contested work around the ground, the tackling pressure, the back and forth. Sometimes games are well played but don't reflect it, and people think that a low scoring game is a shit game of football. Not by a stretch. If the game still has competitiveness throughout, tackling pressure throughout, has highlight moments, it's still a great game of football, and I thoroughly loved watching this game. I was, as a neutral supporter, was on the edge of my seat, especially in the dying moments, because you don't know who's going to stand up. Is Collingwood going to get up and tie this game? Do they have enough time to kick a goal and then maybe register a score to steal it? Can Fremantle go and get a further lead? So much in the dying moments happened in this game. Looking at the match timeline, at quarter time, very low scoring. It was 1-8, the way of Collingwood leading 1-7. Half time, 3-5-23, Collingwood led 2-2-14. At three-quarter time, 5-6-36, Collingwood led 5-2-32, Fremantle, and the final score was Fremantle 7-3-45, defeating Collingwood 5-9-39. As I said, 6 points, and it was there to be won. Both teams edging each other out, getting leads in each quarter. There wasn't a quarter where either team didn't either wrestle some momentum back or didn't flip the switch and kind of bring the lead back their way. It was only the first quarter where Collingwood was able to maintain that lead. After that, it was up and down all the way through. Don't think there was any injuries out of this game. And if there was actually concussion early, and I missed it. But Darcy for Fremantle and De Goey for Collingwood out with concussion, so both will miss round 6 subsequently because of that. You could see how bad Sean Darcy looked in the rooms when it come to singing the song. The concussion hit him hard. He was absolutely rocked. Wouldn't be surprised if he missed more than one game. He looked shot. It opens the door now for Mason Cox to maybe come in and make his debut for Fremantle. Who knows? But having a look around the ground, turning our attention to the team stats. Again, a game impacted by weather. Came out of nowhere, and it happened more often than not in the nighttime games that we witnessed over the course of the weekend. Disposal count only went the way of Collingwood by 6. Both teams registering over 350 disposals apiece. Kicking game was won by Fremantle. No, kicking game was won by Collingwood. Handball game was won by Fremantle, which is weird because Collingwood, I thought, pride themselves a little bit more around the centre contest with handballs, although we know they like to chip and kick around defensively. And Fremantle kind of matched them in kicking, where they're normally just a free flow kind of handballing team. So it was the weather conditions really reined things in. The biggest discrepancy here in the stats is that Collingwood had 61 inside 50s for the game. Fremantle only had 45. Fremantle win this by 6. Now, the inside 50 efficiency is absolutely woeful in this game, and I tried pointing it out with the Western Bulldogs game, and I touched on this in my last round recap, where even though they have kicked very, reputable scores like 90 plus, what they could be scoring comparatively to their inside 50s versus goal conversion could be absolutely disgusting. They could be splitting themselves from the rest of the pack by a country mile. And this is what Collingwood should have done in this game. For the 61 inside 50s to only have 14 scores, 5 of which registered as a goal. There were some goals here where I know Dan McStay had a mark inside 50 and decided he's going to kick it around the corner and do a snap on his dead in front. Shooter, Lachie Schultz, hits the post. There are some moments here that some Collingwood forwards are absolutely going to be regretting. But inside 50, check this out. 38.8% is Collingwood's average for the year. They ran at 23% efficiency inside 50 for this game. Fremantle, their efficiency average 54.6. They ran at 24.4. They were down by over 30%, Fremantle, and we had a 15% drop for Collingwood. 38% is really rough as an average anyway, but 54, that's a huge drop for Fremantle. Around the contest, Fremantle won the hitouts by 20. They won the clearances by 4, so they were finding more midfield ascendancy. And what was really shocking, even though Collingwood had 20 more marks around the ground and, they were able to kind of get momentum on their side a little bit through that. They laid 30-odd, 29 more tackles. It was the work of Angus Anderson in his first game, the grunt work around the contest, his breakaway running. That was a real standout for Collingwood, which some could highlight saying, wow, they've got a great kid, but that could be alarming for the players they have, because if they've got a first gamer putting in all this grunt work, where's the assistance? Where's the help? Ultimately, that's what it comes down to. It was a little bit concerning on that front. We all know Collingwood are going to need to target a reputable forward in the off-season. They can't hinge their bets on Membry and McStay. Jamie Elliott's not going to be there all the time. They're still missing Bobby Hill. They offered Brody Myercheck a 2-year contract. He wanted more, so he fucked off. There are heavy suggestions that Ben King will be going to Collingwood in 2027, which would be huge for Collingwood. He's not going to take them to a premiership instantly, but he gives them a viable forward option that's going to crash packs, going to take big marks. Just forward half of the ball is what lets them down. Defensively, they can kick it and chip it and get all the momentum they want, but if there's no one up forward to take those marks and score, they're not going to win games. They can't expect Nick Dacos to kick 2 goals every week. It's strange, because this was a game where Josh Tracy, I don't think, kicked a goal. He didn't kick a goal at all. And yet they still found a way through Isaiah Dudley kicking 2, with Jai Amos kicking 2, with Witkowski kicking 1, Johnson stood up and kicked 1, Shea Bolton kicked 1. That was enough to win a game. When they had 20 odd less inside 50s, it's a head scratcher. It really is a head scratcher. For this game, I did give 1 vote to Isaac Quaynor. I thought his run off of half-back showed a lot of dare, showed a lot of wanting to take the game on, wanting to inject a little bit of speed in a game that was halted by rain. He had 21 disposals, 6 were contested, 10 marks, 6 tackles, 1 clearance, 339 metres gained, and 4 score involvements. The 2 vote I gave to Luke Ryan. This is where they need a forward with accountability, because he was just eating everything up. And trust me, as a Richmond supporter, I've been on the back end of Luke Ryan going absolutely ballistic in that defensive half. He had 25 disposals, 6 were contested, 10 marks, 4 tackles, 1 clearance, 501 metres gained, only the 1 score involvement, but in his role, he's not expected to get involved in the score involvements. 3 vote I gave to Luke Jackson. I thought his ability to win out around the contest, to get clearances, to impact, with the amount of tackles he did around the contest, I thought it was huge. 17 disposals, 9 were contested, 5 marks, 9 tackles, 38 hitouts, 5 clearances, 146 metres gained, 2 score involvements. His grunt work is incredible, and I personally feel he does his best work as an individual solo ruckman. Taking him out of the contest and putting Sean Darcy in, I think is redundant to Fremantle. I think they should just hedge their bets on Luke Jackson wholly and solely, because when he is left alone to do his thing, he is absolutely incredible to watch. I think Fremantle just need to click onto that. Collingwood, are there worrying signs? Yes, a little bit, but they can find ascendancy. It is still early on. Fremantle, however, starting to really build a belief in their core systems, and to win with only kicking, 7 goals for a game of football is incredibly lucky by some part. But the fact that they have won without having to rely on some players builds a belief that they can share the load a little bit, and I think that's going to hold them in good stead moving forward. The first game on Saturday afternoon was at Barossa Park, with North Melbourne hosting Brisbane, and this had some things within it that I think were very questionable and should be talked about a little bit more. We had some instances where a player got punched in the dick hole, for lack of better words. Zorko swung a fist back and collected Paul Curtis in the fucking beanbag, you know what I'm saying? And only got fined for it, I believe. No sanction. Jared Berry goes for a contest and punches a bloke in the head and didn't even get cited by the MRO, when Darcy Gardner, his own partner, got cited only a few weeks ago for a double-fisted attempt at the ball that hit Aaron Norton in the neck. So you'd think a hit in the neck worthy of a week, and then a club to the side of the head didn't get cited. It starts to beg the question as to whether some teams are kind of being looked at a little bit differently than others, because gut punching, for example, has been heavily scrutinised this year. Yet a few weeks back, Charlie Cameron gut punched Brodie Grundy, didn't get sanctioned. So I don't know, you tell me if there's some teams in the AFL that are being looked at a little bit unjustly and a little bit more fairly than others. Let's you know what I mean? Let's talk about it. We know North Melbourne this year have been a different North Melbourne. They've been a hell of a lot more competitive. And this time last year, I believe this game was the one that ended in a draw. So we know there was belief within this young North Melbourne team that they could take it to Brisbane. And for half a game, that's exactly what happened. Breaking down the match timeline, they led at quarter time, 4-3-27 to 2-3-15. They led at halftime, 5-6-36, led 4-8-32. And then after that, very similar to what we saw Brisbane do against St Kilda, the second half just turned all the way of Brisbane. And they put on that gap that when North Melbourne started coming back in the last, that gap was too hard to stem, and then a late flurry saw Brisbane truly run away with it. At three-quarter time, Brisbane led 9-12-66 to 7-8-50, and the final scoreline saw Brisbane 13-14-92, defeating North Melbourne 9-12-66. 26 points the way of Brisbane. What could have been? I mean, North Melbourne, after the second half, go on to kick 6 behinds. Brisbane go on to kick 6 behinds of their own. So a little bit more accurate shooting could have impacted the game both ways here. Brisbane could have blown out to a bigger lead. North Melbourne could have stemmed it back just for a little bit of, ascendancy. What's going to hit Brisbane the most? Dane Zorko has done a calf injury. I don't know how severe it is. He could be missing up to, I think it was 5 or 6 weeks. They're floating the idea around. His missing is going to be critical, I feel. Even though they've got Kitty Coleman that can play the same role, I think Zorko's leadership and drive off of halfback has been a big part of what has built these last 2 premiership wins that Brisbane has undertaken. His ability to just get the ball and cleanly dispose of it off of halfback and bring players into the game, drag defenders in and kind of, run and carry, very critical to Brisbane's makeup, especially in that back half. And again, they've got players that can fill the role, but I don't know whether they can do it as effectively as he can. I feel he is very underrated in that role. I don't think people pay much mind to him, which is, I don't know whether that's a little bit of, disregard to him as a player and not really giving him his just desserts, because I feel he very much is like a heart and soul player for Brisbane. And it's going to be interesting to see how they operate without that run and dash, whether Kitty Coleman goes back. I know in that grand final he popped off in a big way. Can he bring that back? Can he do that again? Will remain to be seen. Looking at the team stats, break it down, show you guys how it went down around the traps. It was a great game of football to watch. I love the back and forth. Just as someone who supports a rebuilding team, I love to see a young team really take it up. And this was a game where, again, a team's effort through stats isn't reflected on the scoreboard, because when it comes to the stats, I feel North Melbourne comprehensively beat Brisbane around the contest. I mean, disposal count, they beat them by 41. They had 350 disposals. They had 42 more handballs. They had well less inside 50s, which is where the damage was done. They only had 44 inside 50s to 58, which is down on their average this year and is up on Brisbane's average. Inside 50, they actually were more efficient. Brisbane had it 58 times, were only 46.6% efficient. For the 44 entries that North Melbourne had, they were 52% efficient, which is actually more than their average for the year. The hit-out game, Tristan Cherry missing in this lineup is what has been the biggest dagger to the North Melbourne heart, because they lost the hit-outs by 18, but they only lost the clearance game by 3, so they still managed to flip the script a little bit and start roving to the ruckman of Brisbane. And that's what we've seen teams do this year. They've been very clever in the way of being able to read the tap of the opposition ruckman and crumb to them. It's a great watch. They only won the contested game by 4 when talking about North Melbourne, but they absolutely got on top of them by almost 50 in the way of uncontested possession, which is huge, given the fact that, Brisbane pride themselves on maintaining football around the contest. So to give up almost 50 disposals uncontested is very unheard of for Brisbane. But again, everything pretty much here went the way of North, but it was just being able to get those inside 50s and capitalise more. They gave themselves more opportunity, Brisbane, and in the end, that was the game winner. Obviously, if you're going to get more inside 50s and you're giving your forwards a better chance, you're going to win a game of football. And it's unfortunate, because you start to question then, if North Melbourne had 50, 60 odd more disposals, what were they doing with it? Some players for North are being touted as players that get cheap possessions. They sideways kick, they backwards kick. I'm talking about Harry Sheasel, I'm talking about Colby McKercher. Players that have been challenged by the media to take the game on. And I thought in this game, they actually did a lot of forward-moving ball, allowing just the defenders to do the sideways and backways, and they were the drivers with the ball. And I thought that really set North Melbourne up to win this game, but unfortunately was not to be had and to be seen. For the votes in this game, very hard to determine who to give votes to, because there was a handful of players that you could have looked at. I could have looked at Zach Bailey, but overlooked. Hugh McCluggage on return, I thought looked good. Jai Simpkin looked great. Luke Parker off of halfback, I truly feel has been a revelation for North Melbourne. Great move. One vote I gave to Harry Sheasel. I thought his game, instead of getting the easier possessions, going backwards, going sideways, he was forward driven, always looking to move the ball on to a forward target, trying to just build momentum and shift the ball as much as he could. 30 disposals, 13 were contested, 6 marks, 4 tackles, 6 clearances, 236 metres gained, 1 goal assist, 7 score involvements. Lachie Neale gets the 2 vote from me. Again, very impressed with how he has tackled this year, especially given all the rhetoric around his marriage and his breakup and everything that went wrong in the preseason. Could have and should have made him a shell of his former self, but he has come out firing this year. 30 disposals, 20 of those were contested, 4 marks, 3 tackles, 10 clearances, 438 metres gained, and 3 score involvements. Best on ground for me was Luke Davies-Uniacke, and I feel not many people give this guy credit for what he does. He has been huge this year for North Melbourne, criminally underrated and underappreciated. 27 disposals, 10 of those were contested, 3 marks, 8 tackles, 7 clearances, 503 metres gained, 1 goal, 6 score involvements. Again, I think the missing piece for North is Tristan Cherry. They don't have, in my opinion anyway, and one of my closest friends is a North Melbourne supporter, and I'm sure he'll correct me on it. I don't know whether they have serious contending backup for him in the ruck that can play at the level and calibre that Tristan Cherry plays, because not only is he a great ruckman in the way of tap work and bringing the ball down the ground, but his tackle pressure, the ability to get the clearance on his own, and just his aggressiveness and his demeanour around the contest, you know, just the leadership that he brings and the grunt work that he puts onto the ground is truly missed here. And I feel that was the deciding factor in this game. If they had him in this game, I feel it's a completely different ball game, because North Melbourne are getting first use. They would have stemmed the flow with the tap work. I feel he would have absolutely monstered the team of Sam Draper and Darcy Fort. This is a game where he could have got 10 tackles, 10 clearances, 40 plus hit outs. He would have gone absolutely bananas. For Brisbane, they find a way to get the job done, and after a rocky start to the start of the year, they're slowly getting things back on track. And, you know, sometimes it's not how you win. You get 4 points, you bank it, and they're doing that. So, is the possibility of a 3-piece still on the cards? Very well may be, but they're going to need to start playing better football than this, I can assure you of that. The next game saw a huge upset at Adelaide Oval, and no, I'm not talking about the ankle injury that Christian Salem suffered for Melbourne. I'm talking about the fact that Essendon got up and not only won, but won by 45 points. The fuck saw that happening? This absolutely blew me away from Essendon. It makes me question, where the fuck has this effort been up until this point of the year? I know we saw the week prior, so not round 5, round 4, we saw a good collective effort even though they lost. And in this game, in the second half, they put on some of the best football I've seen them play in a very long time, in well over 12 months. This was a young, driven Essendon team that could do no wrong. And as much as I hate to admit it, Brad Scott coached this game to perfection. Let's break it down with the match timeline first, and then we'll jump into the team stats and talk about it. But at quarter time, it was Essendon leading 3-5-23 to 3-1-19, and at half time, Melbourne regained the lead 8-2-50 to 6-8-44. Three-quarter time, Essendon had jumped out to a rather comfortable lead, 12-9-81, leading 9-5-59, and the final scoreline saw them win 17-11-113 to 10-8-68. Melbourne in the second half only managed to kick 2 goals 6. Essendon went on to kick 11 goals 3. It is unfucking heard of. They just flipped the switch and they looked superior. And it was on the back of the effort of some young kids too. And again, I highlighted it through North Melbourne. I'm going to highlight it again through Essendon. As a supporter of a team that is imminently in a rebuild, I love seeing teams rise to the occasion on the back of effort of the youngsters, and this was comprehensive. This was an absolute beatdown. They absolutely monstered them in disposal. 110 more, give or take, around the ground. They had 54 inside 50s, of which they scored 28 times. Huge. They were 5% more efficient. Inside 50, they normally run at 48. For this game, they ran at 51. Melbourne inside 50 normally run at 47. They ran at 38. They were incredibly down. Of course, they're going to get monstered in hitouts when you're playing against Max Gawn. They lost the hitout by 18, but they won the clearance game by 8. Again, another team that was smart enough to know we're going to get beaten in the ruck, but we're going to rove to their ruckman. And one of the first moves that was made throughout the game was playing Peter Wright as a dedicated ruckman, taking him out of that forward line. Match Max Gawn in height, just run with him all game, put in a contest, try to shut down his effort, and that is what Peter Wright did. And I've got to give it where it's due. He stood up tall when needed. Absolutely. Contested possession. They won it by 30 odd, but the uncontested possession, they won by 99. They had almost 100 more uncontested possessions to Melbourne. They were just able to move the ball freely. Marks. Wait for the mark count. Melbourne took 78 marks for the game, which you'd normally think, oh yeah, that's not too bad. Essendon took 139 marks for the game. Their defensive line were eating them like you wouldn't fucking believe. It was insane. They laid less tackles, but I mean, they're going to lay less tackles when they've got the ball most of the time. They've had 100 more disposals. Of course they're going to lay less tackles. This was and again, I've got a very good friend who is an Essendon supporter, and we give each other shit all the time. Him being an Essendon supporter, me being a Richmond supporter, you can understand what the banter would be like. But I was just truly happy for him, and just to see them rise to the occasion, it just shocked the shit out of me. I think a lot of people are sitting here thinking, where did this effort come from? And to think, this is the same Melbourne team that defeated the Gold Coast last week, or the week prior. So, you can never truly judge a team week by week. And that's given evidence here. And I don't know whether just Gold Coast were bad on the day, are Melbourne fraudulent. I don't fucking know. It's so hard to try and work out. But looking at the stats for this game, there are so many players you can look at for votes. I think the 3 I've landed on are great. But let's talk about the role players that played roles first in this game. Obviously, Peter Wright challenged Max Gawn. Max Gawn had 20 more hitouts. Yep, fantastic. But when it comes to stats, Max Gawn only had 4 more disposals around the ground. Matched him in clearances, Peter Wright. Beat him in marks. Beat him in tackles. It was just everywhere, Peter Wright. He was able to shut one of the biggest players down for Melbourne. Now, Keziah Pickett has 28 and kicks 2. That's all right. But McGrath runs a hard tag pretty much on him for most of the game. Now, does Andrew McGrath have a big game? No, he only has the 13 disposals himself. But he still manages in the contest to shut him out of it, to get him uninvolved. You know, Jack Steele's been having big games recently where he has huge tackle numbers. He laid 5. 5 tackles is pretty good, don't get me wrong, but down by his standards. But when you have a look at the top, let me count here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Out of the top 15 players on the ground, 3 of them are Melbourne. You can then extend that to the top 20. Only 4 of those are Melbourne. So out of the top 20 players on the field rating, 7 were Melbourne players. 13 of them were Essendon. And we're talking about the likes of Jordan Ridley, Kyle Langford, Jacob Farrow, who's only played a couple of games. Ben Mackay actually had a great game in defence. Xavier Dersma, Jackson Pryor, Elijah Sartis, Zach Reed. Isaac Kako had arguably his best game as an Essendon player. It was unreal. It was great to watch. Anyway, not going to talk about it much more. Let's get into the votes for this game. All 3 votes go the way of Essendon. The one vote, and I flipped on this for a bit, but we have decided on Zach Merritt. He had 31 disposals, 9 of which were contested, 5 marks, 2 tackles, 5 clearances, 455 metres gained, 1 goal assist, and 9 score involvements. The 2 vote I gave to Darcy Parish, easily his best game since returning from injury. 32 disposals, 11 were contested, 6 marks, 1 tackle, 7 clearances, 408 metres gained, 3 goal assists, and a game-high 13 score involvements. And best on ground, career best numbers, Archie Roberts has turned into something else. And my friend firmly believes he is a future captain of Essendon. And if he leads by example like this, there is no taking that captaincy away from him. This kid is going to be a genuine star of the competition. 42 disposals, 10 were contested, 15 marks, 2 clearances, 658 metres gained, 1 goal and 2 score involvements. Absolutely huge. Now, the question remains, Running into Gold Coast at the Gold Coast this week, can Essendon carry this momentum over and cause another upset, or is this just a flash in the pan performance? This is where a rebuilding club truly needs to find ascendancy. They need to stay in the contest. They can't afford to have a big win here and then get belted the following week, because that's going to kill morale. That's going to kill self-confidence. Rock up to the Gold Coast, throw everything at it, and absolutely push yourselves to the final siren. I'm vastly impressed with what Essendon did this weekend. This was absolutely incredible to watch. With Melbourne, who the fuck knows what's going on, really? Let's just leave it there. I'm just still gobsmacked that they allowed this to happen. Next up was at Norwood Oval with Sydney hosting the Gold Coast, and we had a couple of questions heading into this game. Gold Coast obviously lost the week prior to Melbourne. How were they going to respond? Sydney absolutely belted West Coast. Are they going to fall into a, false sense of security and fumble? Or are they going to follow through? And that's exactly what they did. Sydney were the superior team. There was not a point in this game where I honestly thought Gold Coast were going to wrestle momentum their way. They came back a little bit, but then Sydney always had an answer. And it was on the back of efforts from Brodie Grundy, and namely Isaac Heaney, just saying, boys, jump on my back, we're going to September. He's just turned it around. He's playing currently in that Brownlow kind of form that we saw him start with last year, and then he went and got himself into trouble. This was a performance to be seen. He was absolutely off the charts. He was absolutely everywhere, and it's players like him that you love building clubs around, and Sydney have been able to do that. They've been able to bring players into this team that complement him and Brodie Grundy so well. Charlie Curnow doesn't have the best game in this game, but his acquisition, again, although he's being paid to kick goals and be the premier forward that he is, his presence in that forward line drags the number one defender. It allows a Joel Amadi, a Tom Papley, these other forwards to pop up and get off the chain. And I think Charlie Curnow's been harshly looked at. I mean, I know Kane Corns during the week has already highlighted that some players are performing better than him, but I don't think Kane has assessed the situation well enough to say, hey, well, yeah, okay, some players are playing better than him, but are they commanding the number one defender every week? We'll talk about it momentarily. Match timeline. Quarter time. Sydney led 5-6-36 to 2-1-13. Half time, they led 7-9-51 to 5-5-35. Three-quarter time, 10-13-73 led 8-8-56, and the final score 14-16-100 defeated 9-14-68. Now again, what could have been? After half time, Gold Coast only managed to kick 4 goals, but they also kick 9 behinds. Sydney, they go on to kick 7 goals. They also register 8 behinds. 7 behinds. I can't count. But I digress. This could have been a much closer game. This could have been a bigger blowout. Again, plenty of opportunity going around for both teams, but not capitalising. And we've seen that from both teams in the past. Just a little bit of inaccuracy creeping in. But Sydney were far superior. As I said, I don't know whether the team stats will explain and deliver that. I think they will, personally. Bringing those up right now, they do. So 60 odd or close enough to disposals the way of Sydney. They had 30 more kicks. They had just under 30 more handballs for the game. Inside 50s, they had 62 inside 50s for a return of 30 scores. 56 inside 50s for the Gold Coast. Efficiency around the ground, they were both down on their average, especially the Gold Coast. So Sydney were only 2% down on their average with a 71. But Gold Coast normally running at a 75%, running at a 67% disposal efficiency in this game. As for the forward 50, both down on their averages this year. 54 is the average for Sydney. They had 51, and 50 is the average for Gold Coast, and there was 46. Now, this game I thought was heavily over-umpired. There was 59 free kicks paid in this game. 59. 35 of those went to Sydney, 24 went to the Gold Coast. I didn't think there was anything from a neutral standpoint. I honestly didn't think there was anything untoward with any of those calls. I thought some of them were maybe a little bit borderline. There's obviously calls that are never going to be made that should be made, vice versa. But I don't like games that are over adjudicated. I don't love games that, there are There were whistles constantly blown, free kicks being paid. Didn't like it at all. And despite the fact that Sydney had, you know, the clearance game on their hands, Gold Coast actually had the better of the ruck contest. They did only have the 4 hit-outs more. But again, just getting hands on the ball first, Sydney. They're an incredible midfield to watch. Absolutely love them. Uncontested possessions, they won by 50. They won the contested possessions by 20-odd. Turned the ball over only 5 times less than the Gold Coast, so capitalising there when needed. They laid way more tackles around the contest. Gold Coast only managed 52 for the game, which is down on their average. Sydney laid 97 tackles, which is up by almost 30 on their season average. It was a very defense-driven game plan that Sydney ran into for this game. And when you look at the numbers and the tackles, I mean, Brodie Grundy lays 12, game high. Isaac Heaney lays 11. James Rowbottom lays 10. Jai Sarong lays 7. Papley lays 7. Callum Mills lays 7. Warner lays 6. Jordan lays 5. Huge efforts. Matt Rowell on his first game back lays 7. Doesn't have much input around the ground outside of that from his teammates, which was a little bit upsetting. Again, similar with the highest rated players on the field, when you count down the top 10, only 2 Gold Coast players creep into that, and it's all Sydney, and then it's all Sydney after that. It was comprehensively a Sydney-based game. This is a team that I seriously believe is threatening for a top 4 finish and could threaten for the premiership this year, and I still think the acquisition of Charlie Curnow is part of that. Now, we have a look at Charlie Curnow's input. What does he do in this game? Does he have very little input? Is that why he's getting dragged? He kicked 4 behinds. Only had 11 possessions. But you need to understand, he takes the best defender out of the equation. Now, he takes Sam Collins out of it. Now, Sam Collins only has 4 marks for the game and has 12 disposals. Pretty much nullifies Sam Collins' usual kind of game. Mac Andrew, very low rated in this game. Noah Anderson only had 20, very low. Like, they put the clamps on him pretty well. So they're playing a smart game. Charlie Curnow commands that number 1 defender. What does that do for the forward half of Sydney? That allows Tom Papley to go and kick 3 goals 3. That allows Malcolm Rosas as a crumbing forward to kick 2. That allows Justin McInerney to kick a goal. That allows, you know, room for players like Joel Amadi to normally do some things. I don't know whether he did in this game. No, he only kicked 3 behind Joel Amadi. But again, he had access to the ball because Charlie Curnow's demanding that forward. I think, the defender rather, I think people are failing to recognise that. And I think impact on the scoreboard isn't always necessarily all that somebody can attribute. If somebody can take somebody out of the game and nullify their presence like Curnow did here with Sam Collins, that opens up for the win itself, because you're nullifying such a strong intercept defender being able to slingshot that ball out of your defensive half, of your forward half, their defensive half. You know what I'm saying? I just think, even though Curnow's down on effort from last year at Carlton to this year at Sydney, it's a new club, new systems, new players to play with, new coach to deal with, so you're taking a lot on board, but I think he's still playing a role. As much as you'd love to see him kick 3 or 4 a week, I mean, I tipped him as the Coleman medalist this year, so kind of a little bit of pie in my face right now, but again, if he can not hit the scoreboard, but he effectively takes their number 1 defender out of the equation, he's doing his job, right? Am I missing the fucking boat here? Just agree to disagree? I don't know. Let me know in the comments down below. For the players I voted for this week, I think I actually voted for the exact same 3 in this order last week. And I'm going to do it again if that's the case, because I thought these 3 stood tall. 1 vote I gave to Tom Papley. 17 disposals, 8 contested, 2 marks, 7 tackles, 1 clearance, 357 metres gained, 3 goals, 9 score involvements. The 2 vote I gave to Brodie Grundy. 20 disposals, 10 contested, 4 marks, 12 tackles, 36 hit-outs, 7 clearances, only 82 metres gained, but had 10 score involvements. And best on ground, country mile, Isaac Heaney. 33 disposals, 18 were contested, 2 marks, 11 tackles, 10 clearances, 531 metres gained, 2 goals, 2 goal assists, 12 score involvements and was absolutely off the charts when it came to player ratings. It was a huge game for him. Sydney are absolutely flying. I said they would be a top 5 team this year. I still am happy to lock that in. The Gold Coast I had as a top 4 team, starting to falter a little bit. Lost to Melbourne, have lost to Sydney. They're going to get Christian Petrarca back, so how is their midfield going to look now? Tuke Miller's, I think, going to now get pushed out of that CBA access, which I don't like, especially from somebody looking at it as a fantasy SUPERCOACH kind of point of view, but I think collectively as a team point of view, Tuke Miller is one of those in and under players. He collects the ball, he feeds it out, he's great to look at, and I feel they're wasting him at half forward. I don't know. That's just my opinion. But this is the first time we are going to see the full complement. Petrarca, Anderson, Rowell, and Tuke Miller. No, we are not, because Anderson is out with an appendix injury. So we're at least going to see Christian Petrarca and Rowell together. And we haven't seen that yet. So we'll see whether they complement each other moving forward. Still very much feel that this earlier on in the piece, Gold Coast have plenty of time to get things back on track, and they're capable of doing so. We've seen it this year. Some of their best football has been the best football we have seen. A couple of hiccups along the way, but you'd rather lose those games early than later in the piece. So nothing to worry about wholly for the Gold Coast, because they've still got plenty of moves to make, magnets to be put. You know what I mean? I'm stumbling. They're fine. Don't fucking worry about it. However, if you barrack for the Bulldogs, maybe you should be a little bit worried, because Hawthorn defeated the Bulldogs in the Saturday night clash by 40 points. Did not see that coming. I truly did not. I actually had the Bulldogs tipped, and at the very last minute, I swapped over to Hawthorn, and so glad I did. What this has shown to me is Western Bulldogs have a serious lack of depth. That's all it is. I mean, they're missing Tom Liberatore in the midfield, and his tackling pressure around the contest is being missed. No Tim English. No one else to really take the role. Ed Richards comes back in off an injury, ends up injured again. Buderick ends up injured. Or Aaron Norton's been sent for scans on his hand. Who the fuck knows what's going on there? And if he's out, they're down to maybe Sam Darcy as the number 1 forward, but who else is going to contribute there? They're falling apart, and it's something that has been the case for the Bulldogs for recent years. Their A-graders are absolutely sublime, but where's the next list of talent sitting at? You know what I mean? Like, the next tier, I don't think is up to it. Is not to the same caliber. Breaking down the match timeline, you can see here, outside of a tightly contested first quarter, it was just an onslaught from Hawthorn. At quarter time, Hawthorn led 4-2-26 to 2-3-15. Half time, they led 7-5-47 to 2-7-19. Three-quarter time, 10-10-70, led 6-13-49, and the final score was 15-14, 104, defeating 8-16, 64. After half-time, Hawthorn went on to kick 8 goals, 9 behinds. Bulldog managed 6 goals, 9 behinds. Again, this is what I was talking about when it came to the Bulldogs, and they're putting on like 90 plus scores and they're getting good return, but I've questioned their inside 50 versus goal conversion rate has them poorly sat against contending teams, and things like this is going to happen. As I said, Richards has done an ankle. There's been a hand scan done for Aaron Norton. Buderick has done a lower leg injury, which will see him out for the next 3 to 4 weeks. The good news for the Bulldogs is Tim English is tracking well ahead of time and could return this weekend against Geelong. Liberatore could return, and this ankle injury for Richards might have only been superficial, and he actually might be available this week, but I don't know whether you'd risk that. For Hawthorn, shouldered a hamstring early in the game and will miss at least this coming week. They will reassess after that, so it's not too big. It might be just a minor strain. Always unfortunate when injury goes down. And again, for players like Ed Richards, he comes back from injury, he injures himself and finishes on the bench again. Never a good feeling, never a good look, whether you support the team or just a neutral team. Having a look at the team stats, as you would probably guess from a 40-point win, Hawthorn comprehensively around the ground. 70 disposals, pretty much more than the Bulldogs. 50 more kicks, 20-odd more handballs. Inside 50s is surprising, and this is where I talk about the inability to convert. Now, when you talk about efficiency inside 50, they're saying here that the Bulldogs had 53 inside 50s and were 50% efficient. But that's counting total score. That's not counting just goals alone. And again, 53 inside 50s and they only manage 8 goals. Like, what could have been? If they can register, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, Hawthorn had only 1 inside 50 more and scored 40 more points. This is what I'm trying to say. It's the point I'm trying to make. Surprisingly, the 59% Hawthorn ran at inside 50 is up on their average, which is rather huge. They dominated the hitouts, and this is just talking to the point where Tim English has no solid backup, and this is where they struggled. 64 hitouts to 17, and surprisingly, although they monstered the hitouts, they only lost the clearance game by 12. So they found a little bit of ascendancy there. The centre clearances the Bulldogs won. It was the stoppage clearance where Hawthorn got ascendancy. Looking at the individual performances, I'm on the fly again. I've just deleted someone who I had for the 1 vote, and I will say I did have Blake Hardwick in the 1 vote slot. He was the highest rated player on the field. I thought his defensive efforts were huge, but as I look down here, you've got to give Jai Newcomb some just desserts here, because he's had a monster game. And I feel terrible for not voting for him. So let's go on the fly. Let's shift my votes a little bit. We're going to push James Sicily down into the 1 vote. He had 24 disposals, 4 of which were contested, 13 marks, 2 tackles, 493 metres gained, 3 score involvements. I thought defensively they were huge. Some of the biggest rated and highest rated players on the field were Blake Hardwick, James Sicily, Josh Battle, Connor McDonald, Jarman Impey. Defensive efforts. It really, really stood tall. They were getting all those inside 50s, and then Hawthorn were just able to rally them out all willy-nilly. Absolutely destroyed the forward half of the Bulldogs and gave them 0 chance. I'm going to throw the 2 vote to Jai Newcomb, who, again, I'm overlooking. When I look... Let me break it down, right? We're going to have a chat about it. We're going to talk about it. When I personally look at who I think is best on ground, I look for players that impact in different ways. It's not always about the player that has the most touches. It's players that defensively can shut someone down, lays a monster amount of tackles, defensively takes a lot of marks and intercepts, and that's where a Barras, a Sicily, a Hardwick might get votes for me over the efforts of Jai Newcomb. But having a reassessment here, Newcomb can't be looked past. He had 28 disposals, contested we'll get to momentarily, 3 marks, 4 tackles, 14 clearances, 388 metres gained. He had the 1 goal himself. Turning attention to the score assists, he managed to get, let's scroll down, let's find him. How far down do we have to look for Jai Newcomb? He had 19 contested possessions from his 28, and he had 3 score involvements. Best on ground, I thought, was Jack Ginnivan. He was something special. He was game leader for score involvements. He was absolutely everywhere. He had a game-high goal assists. Huge game for him. 28 disposals, 11 were contested, 9 marks, 1 tackle, 4 clearances, 464 metres gained, 1 goal, 5 goal assists, 10 score involvements. Again, I've said it before, I'm going to back it up. Hawthorn, very much so, probably have the best defense in the competition. They just lock that back half down severely. They're showing their midfield doesn't have to be full of A-graders. They've got role players that get the job done. Forward half of the ball, they've got many contributors to hit the scoreboard. Jack Gunston, Mitch Lewis, Jack Ginnivan, Nick Watson, Chol when he's not injured, Dylan Moore. You know, all these players just being able to contribute in different ways has Hawthorn pressed as one of this year's best. They actually look like they are a top 4 team when they put in efforts like this. And could they do damage come September? I definitely think so. As for the Bulldogs, purely shown here, they cannot just rely on Marcus Bontempelli to carry them every week. They need to have a genuine backup ruckman, because outside of Tim English, they've got no one. They need to reassess their forward half, because if Norton goes down and only leaves Sam Darcy, who's going to stand up next? More questions than answers for the Bulldogs, which I think is a worry sign. 3 games of football rounded out the gather round on Sunday, the first of which was Geelong hosting West Coast, and it played out as we expected it to play out. It was Geelong by the tune of 46, and with a wayward kicking Geelong, could have and should have been 60, 70, 80 plus points the win. They made West Coast look good in part, I feel, and I don't know whether that's me being a little bit too harsh to West Coast. For a half of football, just before halftime, where Geelong got a little bit of a rally going on, West Coast pushed them. And I don't know whether that is Geelong allowing them into the contest or whether that was West Coast putting in a solid effort. It's hard to gauge sometimes. And that's not me trying to knock West Coast. That's just me questioning where this is coming from. Because when you look at the match scoreline here, quarter time, Geelong led 4-5-29 to 3-4-22. At halftime, it was 10-8-68, leading 5-8-38. But it wasn't until a very late push on goal that Geelong was able to get that 30-point break. And then after that, it was catch me if you can. 14-13-97 led 9-8-62, with the final score line 17-20-122, defeating 11-10-76. That second half saw West Coast manage 6 goals 2, and on the other side of that, Geelong went on to kick 7 goals 12. What could have been, right? Again, a team where, and this is why I keep highlighting this, because we've got 10 teams effectively playing finals this year. We've got a top 6, and then 7 to 10. Those 4 teams play off in a wildcard round to get that 7th and 8th spot to make your top 8, essentially. That's how it's going to work. And this year, when we look at the percentiles and the ladder later on in this video, percentage is now going to play the biggest factor I feel it's ever played in the competition because of those spots. Geelong against West Coast needs to be 60, 70, 80 points. They need to be generating more goals than behinds to get that bigger percentile, because you don't want to be falling out of certain configurations. That's just my take. Feel free to disagree. There was a little bit of insult to injury for West Coast, and I feel so bad for Devon Robertson. He's done his ACL and he's out for the year. This is a young kid who couldn't get a game at Brisbane, has come over to West Coast. He was absolutely huge, I feel, in the scope of young kids for the Eagles. Gut runner, great around the contest, loves to tackle, brings a lot of pressure, and now he's out for 12 months. It's such a fucking shame. Football, as much as I love it, it's such a fucking sour thing to see players go down, especially young kids that are thriving. Never good to see. Looking at the team stats, again, maybe one of those games where scoreboard doesn't reflect effort, because yes, Geelong had 50 more disposals, but only 50 more in a game where Geelong kick 37 scores is actually quite impressive. They matched them in handball pretty much only by 20. They lost the kicking game by 30. They matched them pretty much and only lost disposal efficiency around the ground by 0.3%. They had 7% better inside. They were well over their average for inside 50. Inside 50, their average is normally 53 West Coast. They ran at 61%. It was quite impressive. The only, obviously, thing that let them down was from the 37 scores they registered, come from 67 inside 50s versus the 42 that West Coast had. So obviously Geelong getting themselves better looks with ball in hand, and that's just a more accomplished team taking on a team that's rebuilding. That's all you chop it up to. Eagles did win the hitouts, and they only lost the clearance game by 8. So again, splitting hairs, but we're looking at highlights for a rebuilding team, and to say, okay, we lost by almost 50 points, but we matched them in the clearance game. You know, we beat them in hitouts. You look for small things, and they might be minute things to some people, but I think it's a big thing for me. Contested possession, uncontested possession, they coughed up. More marks Geelong had. The tackle game was 20 more the way of Geelong. So some stats went the way of West Coast and were more respectable. Some obviously expected to be bigger by Geelong. It's unfortunate, because the West Coast, you know, were up and about. They won 2 games and then they got smacked by Sydney. At least they came out in a game here and gave it their all, because this could have easily been, as I said, if Geelong had kicked straight 70, 80 points, and then West Coast fans are looking at themselves in a little bit more of a darker light. So to capitalise on that, I think that's a good thing. And then statistically, to look at the breakdown and see that they've matched them in some areas, I think that's a great takeaway, especially for a young rebuilding team. As far as the votes go, I think I've landed on the best 3 here. They are the highest 3 ranked on the field, but that doesn't play into things. I just think when looking at the game, some people that have watched have had different players in their votes, and I feel these 3 deservingly get the votes here. I gave 1 vote to Tanner Brunn. I thought after sitting 12 months out for what he dealt with, we won't get into it, he's returned in some form. He's an incredible kid to watch. If he was on the radar to go to another club, I would happily snap him up. He's a great use of the ball, loves to bring a lot of pressure to the game, and I think he just complements that Geelong midfield so well. 28 disposals, 10 were contested, 6 marks, 7 tackles, 5 clearances, 510 metres gained, 2 goal assists, and 11 score involvements. Tom Atkins gets the 2 vote. Not often spoken about, because when you talk about Geelong, you talk about how well Bailey Smith played, how well Max Holmes played. Tom Atkins around the contest is so critical to Geelong, and yet I feel not many people speak about his efforts, and I'm going to highlight them today. 30 disposals, 19 were contested, 2 marks, 11 tackles, 6 clearances, 391 metres gained, 1 goal assist, 9 score involvements, and best on ground was Bailey Smith. He's starting to reclaim that form again, and it's hard to knock him. He looks great. He looks good. Sometimes turns the ball over with those stupid, I've got to get the ball and bang it on quick, and that's kind of related to the amount of meters gained he gets every week. But he was critical in this game. He racked it up. He got people involved. Game high score involvement speaks to that. 34 disposals, 11 were contested. 4 marks, 5 tackles, 7 clearances, 868 metres gained, 1 goal, 2 goal assists, 13 score involvements. Coming into this game, a lot of people would have expected Geelong to win comfortably. The fact that West Coast can walk away, as I've pointed out, with some statistical advantage and say, hey, we matched a grand final winning team, a grand finalist in clearances, in stoppage work, in tap outs, there's things to take away. It's all positive when moving forward, because you give yourself enough belief that you can still be competitive enough. It's just the scoreboard blows out a little bit out of proportion to the effort that you're putting in, which has been, I feel, what we've seen from Essendon, what we've seen from West Coast, what we've seen from Richmond. We've seen effort in areas, but the blowouts on the scoreboard have been a little bit insurmountable. But I give West Coast credit where it's due. This should have and could have been a blowout, just like the Sydney game was. They hold tough, they dig deep, and they stand tall, and they can walk away with little wins. Even if they're minute to some, I think it's bigger to West Coast, and I give them all respect for that. Is there anything to respect out of the next game for my Tigers having taken on GWS at Barossa? Let's see, because we got absolutely belted. I mean, we've kicked our biggest score for the year, but we still lost by 56 and still conceded 20 goals. We can't fucking win. And I've got opinions, and I'm going to share them. So let's look at the match timeline first. At quarter time, 8-4-52, led 2-2-14. Yeah, thanks for coming, Richmond. At half time, 11-7-73, led 6-4-40. 3-quarter time, 16-8-104, led 10-7-67. The final score was 20-11-131, defeating 11-9-75. Great. GWS have been suffering for weeks, and Richmond have just played them back into form. How fucking incredible. 2 injuries for GWS will see them miss the Battle of the Bridge against Sydney this coming weekend, because Cornelio and Cadman both finished the game concussed. Very unfortunate circumstances for both of them. Both of them were completely accidental and incidental as well. It's just the nature of the game sometimes, and it's just sad to see. Again, injuries have been plaguing teams all year this year. GWS in the end almost had 100 more disposals than Richmond did. Whilst the kicking game was only won by about 20, the handball game was cleared by over 70 and 80. It was huge. The inside 50 count, Richmond actually had more inside 50s for the game. We've only registered 48 as an average this year. We had 59. Too bad we only managed an efficiency of 39 inside percentile for inside 50, whereas GWS had 54 inside 50s, running at an average of 48%, and they kicked at 64%. So again, Richmond played them in the form. Fantastic. The hitouts. We're missing our ruckman. We bring in Oliver Hayes-Brown, debuts. He tries his hardest, but we still get squashed in the hitouts here, 53-19. What I will say is, at least Oliver Hayes-Brown made a contest. On debut, I thought he was great, and he's a big unit. I mean, he's only 3 centimetres short of Aaron Sandilands. He's only 2 centimetres or 1 centimetre shorter than Max Gawn. He's a monster, and get some games into him. and I'd love to see what he could deliver. A highlight. We've got a highlight. We actually beat GWS in the clearance. That's actually quite surprising. The centre clearance we won. We lost the stoppage clearance by 2. But there, you've got something to highlight. Maybe we can take that out of the game just a little bit. I don't know. Possession around the ground, as I said, they won comfortably. I mean, we only lost the contested possessions by 18. But they had close enough to 70 uncontested possessions more, which was a damn shame. They only beat us in marks by 11. We actually laid more tackles, but obviously if you've got almost 100 more disposals, you should win the tackle count. It's just unfortunate. We're getting all those inside 50s and no return, and I think we chop that up to the fact that we've got no senior leaders up there. You look at the number of games our forwards have played. You got Jonty Fall, who's played 20 games, could barely get a touch. Makaiti Lafau, only a handful of games. He has his best game. He kicks 4. He looked great. Liam Fawcett kicks 3 in, his 4th AFL game? Like, our forward line is depleted. Our defensive line is probably our most experienced line. We've got Hopper, Prestia, and Taranto in the midfield, but we might as well have Prestia and Hopper fucking running around with cement boots on, because that's how effective they've been in the midfield. So it's pretty much Tim Taranto. Our forward half is just so squashed, and we just need some ascendancy there. At least Tom Lynch, in the way of his injury rehab, is a little bit closer to return than thought. I think he's only a week or 2 away from possibly returning. So him in that team will not only command presence, but will bring a little bit of leadership and experience that we're lacking severely. I would love to see some other players get opportunity here, because we need it. I'm a firm believer. I'm at a point here with Richmond that we need to embrace the fact that we're in a rebuild. We're going to lose games by sizable margins. So what do we have to lose when playing young kids? How do we suffer from a Hopper or a Prestia playing reserves in the VFL and having a Burton or a Puka or a Rechko or Cumming, or when they're ready, Houghton? These type of players that are going to be coming in to our rebuild, they're not going to get game time because Uze seems to persist with Prestia, Hopper, and these players that are plodding around with no speed. We need speed. We can't be exposed, caught holding the ball, turning the ball over, and it's all our senior players. We've had no accountability from any senior player, maybe outside of Tim Taranto this year. We've got Nankervis injured, our captain. We've got Tom Lynch injured. We've got Vlosten, who has barely taken an intercept grab this year. Nathan Broad is touted to be going back to Western Australia and seems disinterested. We've got no leadership coming from Prestia, none coming from Hopper. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm just at a point here where I know where we're at. We're going to get beaten most weeks. We're going to struggle to get wins. North Melbourne and West Coast are maybe the 2 teams, Essendon, maybe 3 teams that we have a chance of beating. But realistically, Essendon, North and West Coast have been playing better than Richmond over the last couple of weeks, so they probably beat us. So, do we finish winless this year? I don't know. And if that's the case, why don't we play younger kids and expose them to the game? Just saying. It's as simple as looking at the votes here, people. I don't want to dwell on this too long. 3-2-1, all the way of GWS. 1 vote I'm giving to Lockie Ash. 35 disposals, 8 contested, 4 marks, 4 clearances, 932 metres gained, and 6 score involvements. The 2 vote goes to Clayton Oliver. 31 disposals, 15 contested, 1 mark, 5 tackles, 8 clearances, 319 metres gained, 1 goal assist, and 10 score involvements. Best on ground was Finn Callaghan. Could not get a hand on him in the midfield. 37 disposals, 17 contested, 4 marks, 5 tackles, 6 clearances, 483 metres gained, 1 goal assist, 8 score involvements. GWS, the Orange Tsunami got rolling. We've got momentum back. They've got belief back. This could be what they needed to get their season back on track, just playing Richmond. Richmond, on the other hand, I know, as I said, I know where we're at. I need to endure. I bleed yellow and black. I'll never take my scarf off. I'll never walk away from a game early. I'll always watch the final siren. It's getting hard to watch. And Uze's in his 3rd year. I know we're rebuilding. I know people are saying, oh, you fucking all rubbished Hardwick early and look what happened. But Hardwick showed improvement over his time with us. Uze's had us for 3 years in a rebuild and we're stepped backwards. So something's got to give here. Either we need to reassess where our players are at, work out who's up to the challenge and work out who wants to play, or we need to look at whether we can get a coach like Hinkley or Longmuir or Simpson. They're all available. They're all looking. Maybe we go knock on their door and find out if they want to come in, because Uze's going to start getting thrown to the Wolves soon, and the Wolves' jaws are snapping and they're fucking hungry. Gather round finish to Adelaide Oval. Port Adelaide, St Kilda. St Kilda win by 14 in not only, in my opinion, one of the most one-sided pieces of umpiring I've ever seen, but one of the most controversial outcomes that I've ever seen, given the circumstances that happened in this game. It also makes me feel compelled to do a separate video just talking about it, and I think I might, but I digress. Let's talk about it. St Kilda did get to a red-hot start, but the amount of goals they had generated from 50-metre penalties that were very line ball touchy, or blatant free kicks that weren't the other way of Port. St Kilda supporters have been posting about the fact that they feel that Port Adelaide were robbed, and that's saying something. Some St Kilda supporters are saying, oh, we don't normally get the rub of the green, so it's about time we did. Don't hang your hat on winning a game by umpiring decisions. That's fucked. Anyway, St Kilda quarter time, 4-4-28, led 1-2-8. Half time, 8-8-56, led 4-5-29. Three-quarter time, 10-8-68, led 8-11-59. Final score, 12-9-81. Led 9-13-67. Now, injuries. Can't remember whether there were any. I think there might have been. No, there weren't. But there was a report. We'll talk about that momentarily. We'll break down the team stats first, and then we'll look at the free kicks, because I want to break it down, because I think by the end of the game, the free kick count actually did even out a little bit, but the game was adjudicated heavily the way of St Kilda. Actually, the free kick count finished 16-23. So 7 more free kicks, but I feel later in the game, it kind of evened up a little bit. Around the contest, Port Adelaide had 20 more disposals. They had 21 more inside 50s. Again, this is a team that isn't getting returned for effort. So many teams this year are getting the ball inside 50 more often than not, and then failing to do anything with it. And it's just costing them games of football. For the 60 inside 50s, efficiency inside 50 was 46% for Port, which was down from their average of 52. St Kilda only had 39 inside 50s, and they ran at 51%, which is up from their average of 48. The stoppage game. Hitouts was won by St Kilda by 1. Clearances was won by the way of St Kilda by 2. Uncontested possessions was won by St Kilda, the way of 3. Contested possessions was won by Port in the way of 4. So around the contest, it was incredibly close. Port Adelaide took 17 more marks for the game. That was the only big break. Tackles as well. St Kilda laid 13 more tackles. So St Kilda laid more tackles. Port Adelaide took more marks. It was an even split around the contest, minus the fact that Port Adelaide had 21 more inside 50s and just failed. And you could say, well then, you know, that's the difference maker there. They failed to generate from scores inside 50. Yeah, that's fine. But let's look at the players that got free kicks, shall we? Let's see if I can actually bring that up as a statistic. Can I actually bring up free kicks for versus free kicks against? Can I do that? Let me have a look. Let me have a look here live through all these little things that I can add to my list here. Can we get free kicks? Frees against? Frees for. Yep, let's add that to my list. Frees for. Let's have a look. Nasiah Wanganeen-Malira had 6 free kicks for. That was double any other player. Okay. Liam Ryan. Pretty sure he kicked 2 goals, didn't he? Did he kick 2 goals? I think he kicked 2. Did he kick 1? Liam kicked 1 goal 1 off of 2 head-high free kicks inside 50. Jason Horne-Francis gets head ripped off. Play on. There was a contest where a Port Adelaide player got front-on contact from Nasiah Wanganeen-Malira. Play on. It was very, as I said, one-sided. St Kilda were getting paid one thing. Port Adelaide were getting paid what should have been paid and weren't getting it. And it was frustrating. Now, let's get into the controversial. Mitch Owens gets paid a free kick for being held in a ruck contest, lines up for goal. 50-metre penalty is paid against Zach Butters for saying something to the umpire. Mitch Owens kicks the goal. Zach Butters is standing there wondering what the fuck's going on. As they're going back as a collective midfield to the centre bounce, umpire Nick Foot runs past and says, "I'm reporting it." And Zach Butters basically says, "What for? What did I do?" Like, adamant he doesn't know what's going on. After the game, Zach Butters has apparently gone up to the umpire to ask what's going on. The umpire didn't want to talk to him, got off the field. He gets interviewed, adamant he hasn't said anything bad language, anything untoward, nothing abusive. Goes to tribunal, gets referred straight to the tribunal. Now, I thought if sent to the tribunal, you were looking at weeks. The AFL decided that Zach Butters was never going to get anything more than a $1,500 fine. If that's the case, why has it gone to the tribunal? You know what I'm saying? Anyway, they lose the audio of Zach Butters and what he apparently said. Now, it was leaked later on. You could very vaguely hear him say something along the line of that paid or paid that. That's all you can hear. But Nick Foot is adamant. Zach Butters has turned around and said, "How much are they paying you?" Now, Zach Foot is employed by Sportsbet under horse racing, betting, and analytics. Nothing linked with sports or football, but he still works 9 to 5 for Sportsbet. Conflict of interest, I personally think. Load of bullshit. If players can't bet, how can umpires and AFL officials be linked to a betting company? I don't understand. But I digress. Zach Butters is adamant he didn't say that. Ollie Wines is right next to him. He's adamant he didn't say that. Zach Butters has come off the field after that and has been irate on the bench saying, "I didn't say anything." And Rutten is on the bench, and he even goes to the tribunal and says, "Zach came to the bench and was adamant he didn't say this. He told us what he said." 3 accounts from 3 different people from Port Adelaide, all saying the exact same thing. No audio from Nick Foot. Audio before, audio after, but in the moment, the audio has gone missing. So he's got no evidence. It's just his word against 3 other players or 3 other people that have given the exact same account. And the AFL, as of the point of this recording, a couple of hours ago, found Zach Butters guilty, fined him $1,500. They've basically called him and Ollie Wines liars. They have backed up their own, because I feel if finding Zach Butters not guilty, they then would have had to open up a can of worms of then, well, why does he work for Sportsbet? And all of this starts spilling out, and they've tried to cover their own ass. Is it a little bit ironic that you can hear all the audio prior and all the audio after, but in the moment, whatever Zach says is muffled and inaudible? Fucking, I don't know. Zach Butters needs to challenge it. Can't stand for it. This is corruption. And I hate to say that. It's a load of bullshit. It is the AFL covering their own tracks. Something needs to be done. I need to move on before I lose my mind. For this game, 3-2-1, where did I land? I did land on 2 Saints and 1 Port Adelaide player. 1 vote I gave to Callum Wilkie. Always a defensive wall. He had 23 disposals, 3 were contested, 15 marks, 5 tackles, 416 metres gained and 1 score involvement. The 2 vote I gave to Zach Butters. 31 disposals, 16 contested, 2 marks, 6 tackles, 5 clearances, 631 metres gained, 1 goal and 6 score involvements. And best on ground despite the 6 free kicks for. Nasiah Wanganeen-Malira played his best game in a very long time. 28 disposals, 13 contested, 4 marks, 9 tackles, 6 clearances, 524 metres gained, 2 goals, 1 goal assist, 6 score involvements. Port Adelaide, up and down. Probably going to be a bottom 4 team this year, which is actually out of the realm of what I thought they were going to be. I knew they'd slip, didn't think they'd slip this far. St Kilda, they win, but I still don't think they're even going to compete around that wild card. I think they're still not good enough. Their acquisitions still haven't stood tall enough, I feel. It's going to be interesting watch for them. Let's just wrap it up. I don't want to dwell on it anymore. That I'm getting heated and I don't even fucking barrack for Port Adelaide. With all the games out of the way, we can now turn attention to the leaderboard for the 2026 Hip and Shoulder MVP Award. We do have a definitive top 5. We do have people around about 6th to 10th that now have clumped up quite a bit as well, so there's going to be some contenders moving forward. But in 5th place, on 7 votes, we have Sydney's Isaac Heaney. In 4th place, on 8 votes, we have Collingwood's Nick Dacos. In 3rd place, on 9 votes, we have Western Bulldogs' Marcus Bontempelli. In 2nd place, on 10 votes, we have North Melbourne's Harry Sheasel. And in first place on 11 votes apiece, we have Geelong's Bailey Smith and Port Adelaide's Zach Butters. For those that are wanting something more substantial than my imaginary votes and award, we can turn attention to where the ladder sits and where your team is situated after round 5. And we've had some movement with the wins and losses over this weekend. So this is how the ladder sits. The top 4, all sitting on equal amount of points, split by percentage. And again, this is where percentage comes into play. We have Sydney in first place, Fremantle in second, Hawthorn in third, and the Bulldogs dropping down to 4th, all on 16 points, only suffering 1 loss apiece. From 5th down to 9th, we have the same amount of wins for all teams, again separated by percentage. So our top 6 is rounded out by the Gold Coast in 5th and Brisbane in 6th, with North Melbourne in 7th, Geelong in 8th, and Melbourne in 9th, all on 12 points, having lost 2 games apiece. Port Adelaide rounds out that wildcard figuration in 10th, but we also have Adelaide in 11th, GWS in 12th, Collingwood in 13th, St Kilda in 14th, and West Coast in 15th, all on equal amount of points, all suffering 3 losses each. So again, West Coast is currently in the bottom 4, but only 1 win out of that top 10. They're essentially out of the top 10 because of their percentage. So again, this is how close this year is so far after 5 rounds. This is where percentage plays a factor. Outside of that, Carlton and Essendon are 16th and 17th, having won 1 game apiece, and Richmond still haven't won a game, dead last. Again, the memes that could have been if Tom Lynch had kicked straight and we had beaten Carlton, Carlton would be on the bottom of the ladder having won a game. That would have been a lot more entertaining. At least Richmond would have won a game and I'd be a little bit happier. Oh, fuck. And as always, ladies and gentlemen, there is all but one thing left to do before we can officially recap the round, and that is to announce my team of the week for round 5, which was pretty comprehensive and easy to piece together this week, so this is where I landed. In defence, I have Lockie Ash and Callum Wilkie in the back pockets and James Sicily at full back, with Blake Hardwick and Archie Roberts on the half-back flanks, and Luke Ryan at centre-half back. Across the midfield, I have Isaac Rankin and Darcy Parish on the wings, with Isaac Heaney in the centre as this week's captain, with Brodie Grundy in the ruck, Bailey Smith as this week's vice-captain in ruck rover, and Nasiah Wangani Malira in rover. My forward line sees Josh Rochelle and Jason Horne-Francis on the half-forward flanks and Oscar Allen at centre-half forward, with Jack Ginnivan and Tom Papley in the forward pockets, and Aaron Cadman at full forward. My interchange consists of Zach Butters, Luke Jackson, Finn Callahan, Zach Merritt, and Lockie Neal. Begrudgingly, this week's Coach of the Week is Brad Scott, and my assistant coach couldn't be split, so I'm giving it to both Sam Mitchell and Ross Lyon. That is it, ladies and gentlemen. Round 5 is officially recapped. It dropped a little bit later than I would have hoped. I've been a little bit under the weather, but I appreciate you guys coming out and checking it out. If you did enjoy, I would appreciate you hitting that like button down below. Let me know your thoughts over the course of the round and how your team performed in the comments down below. Feel free to hit me up on social media. Those links can be found down in the description of this video. And if you want to get on board the community we are piecing together, hit that subscribe button as well. But that's it from me, guys. I'm out of here, and as always, I will catch you guys next time.